Last video, I talked about how a very large swarm of nanoparticles could create a Tic Tac shape just simply by condensation and dispersal. Now that's all hypothetical, of course. We don't know whether these things, whether this technology exists. Simple hypothesis until we get more evidence. Now, here's another option. This basically involves imagining four-dimensional space. Okay, so let me explain. We'll start off with a two-dimensional world. Okay, so that's the two-dimensional Earth. Now, there are a lot of misconceptions about two dimensions. If you've ever read the book Flatlands, can't remember who the author is, doesn't matter, you should put it on Amazon, maybe acquire a copy for yourself. It's by a mathematician, but he has these shapes that live on a two-dimensional surface. There are triangles, there are circles, there are squares or rectangles, and they move along on this two-dimensional surface that he's created. Now, if you're trying to imagine what a two-dimensional being would see, this is actually the wrong structure. And here's the reason, is that for this two-dimensional creature, if it's triangular, or for that one if it's circular, or that if it's square, to move around on the surface, this surface would have to be fluid for it to move around. Because right now, if this is in any way equivalent to our three-dimensional surface, this would all be soil. Okay, so this triangle here would be surrounded on all sides by soil, as indeed would this square and the circle. So they couldn't move anywhere unless they were like earthworms and basically took in some soil at one end and emitted it at the other. So without that, they couldn't actually go anywhere. All right. So the only way they could move is outside of the perimeter of their two-dimensional Earth. So they could do it on the surface, or they could do it in the sky if they were able to fly. Okay. So that's the first thing. If I were to draw an ocean on this planet, I couldn't do it here and imagine that these triangles would be going for a swim in the ocean, because this ocean would be wholly and utterly surrounded by soil and would have to be an underground reservoir. So the only place you could draw an ocean that makes sense would be here. And this is the mistake that the author of Flatlands and even people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who have spoken a little bit about this on one or two of his videos, have gotten wrong, is that as a three-dimensional being, you can't look down on a two-dimensional surface and see things like this moving around on it, because that simply wouldn't make any sense. You'd have to have them sitting up here. So if you draw a human being on this, which is a two-dimensional human being, you'd have to draw them here. What is it that these creatures can see? Once again, these creatures here can't see anything because they're all underground. They're surrounded on all sides by soil. This one should be able to see two-dimensional light coming in from all sorts of sources, including light bouncing off the ground. So he should be able to see the ground and the ocean in the distance. Because let's put a moon up here. So he's walking around on a moonlit night. Okay. Now, in order to see anything, his eyes can't be like Peppa Pig's eyes. Okay. So I don't know if Peppa Pig looks like this, but I know her eyes are here. Now, once again, Peppa Pig's eyes, in this case, are surrounded on all sides by flesh. So in a world where Peppa Pig is reliant on light getting into its eyes that are there are useless. Any eye that Peppa Pig will find useful to have to be on the edge of the face. This way, let's just say that the sun is behind the Earth over there partly, but some of the sunlight gets to the moon, strikes the moon, comes back and hits his eye. Okay, and it goes through the eye onto the retina, and now this creature here can see something, this human being. So now, I am a three-dimensional creature. He can't see me because all his light comes in these kind of directions, okay? Nothing comes in from over here. If it does, it'll go through his air. It'll appear, for the smallest instant, it'll appear as a dot in his field of view and disappear. Okay? But I can see a lot of things that he can't see. So, for example, if there's somebody else behind him, also with an eye, and a third person behind that one, this one cannot see this one, because this one is beyond his line of sight. Even though to us there are three people in a row, to him, he has visibility of only this middle character here, but not the end character. Okay? So let's make this guy look the other way, actually. All right. So now, as a three-dimensional creature, which I am, I'm going to have a bit of fun. I've got here a laser pointer, and I'm going to switch it on. Boom. And what we have here is a small red light circle caused by this laser beam. I'm going to turn it off, switch hands. Okay, now, the only reason this happens is that the light from my pen torch hits the white surface of this paper and bounces back into my eye. So there's no reason at present for any of these characters to be able to see this light. Because remember, all of this is air and atmosphere up on here. Okay, so this light should, in a realistic two-dimensional setting, go straight through that air and disappear. So he'll never see this light beam, because all that this is the intersection of the light beam with the two-dimensional solid surface, which is not solid in his world. Get it? The only way that he can see it is if there was already something in the air that the photons from this light beam could excite and ionize, for example. So, for example, if there was, I don't know, two-dimensional nitrogen or some other gas in his air that these photons could somehow excite in the area that it strikes them, you would get potentially a two-dimensional light circle which emits light in all different directions and will be able to hit his retina. Okay, I'm going to turn this off and switch hands. Assuming that could happen, that perhaps there's some two-dimensional nitrogen, two-dimensional water vapor perhaps in his atmosphere, and I'm able to illuminate that, I can now do whatever I like. I can move this light right away across the sky, at enormous speeds without ever creating a sonic boom, because there's no movement of air. And I could move it at all sorts of different angles. I could make it do 90-degree turns, 180-degree turns, and make it go around in circles, do whatever I like, basically. And all of these characters here would be wondering what on earth this thing is. I would suggest to you that a lot of the UFO sightings are characterized by the movement of the object in these really anomalous ways, which can really only best be recapitulated by me doing this. That kind of movement is very similar to people flicking their wrists. That's the only way you get these kind of jerky movements that seem to defy all laws of physics, gravity, and so on. This is why I don't believe in the anti-gravity drives or the warp drives or such like, because I think the only thing that makes those movements is essentially the flick of a wrist, causing the movement of a laser pointer. Let's have a look at what's going on. All right, so I'll put my pen torch away here, my laser pointer. What we've got here is a three-dimensional light source. Three-dimensional light source. It creates a three-dimensional light beam. So the beam will be three-dimensional. It strikes a two-dimensional surface, and you end up with a two-dimensional light circle. Now, there are all these Navy pilots. Let's call these Navy pilots. They're not in their aircraft or on their ship right now, but they have seen a Tic Tac UFO. Okay? I would suggest to you that if you were to take a four-dimensional laser pointer, emit a four-dimensional light beam, and we don't know what kind of light that they're using, because it could be some kind of radiation that we're not aware of yet, and shine it onto a three-dimensional surface, and I'm deliberately putting surface in inverted commas because to us it's not a surface, but to a four-dimensional being, our three-dimensional world would be a surface. Just as for us, this guy's world is a surface, even though to him it's not. Okay? But we've shone this four-dimensional light beam, radiation beam if you like, of some kind, onto a three-dimensional surface. What we'd create then is not a two-dimensional light circle, but a three-dimensional one. Okay? And of course we don't have to make it a light circle. We can make it any shape we like. We could make it tic-tac shaped, we could make it triangle shaped, and we could even create potentially, if you're really clever about it, the cube encased in the globe, which has been seen in over the oceans around America at times. Okay? Now, I want to know what you think about that. I think this is a pretty plausible explanation. you would need to have four-dimensional beings. Whether you believe in them or not is irrelevant, because we can't have proof. We can't imagine the fourth dimension. But I think we need to start throwing out hypotheses about how these UFOs come to be. We've got the nanotechnology idea, and now we've got the four-dimensional light beam idea. Now, just as a little aside, I don't know if you've ever heard about ball lightning. So, ball lightning is during a thunderstorm where we normally get lightning strikes. I don't know if they really look like that, but there you go. That's my lightning strike. Now what we've got here is a three-dimensional light source, which is basically the cloud from which these arise. We've got a three-dimensional beam of particles striking a two-dimensional surface, and you would of course get a two-dimensional point of impact of this light on the Earth. Now what we have to take a four-dimensional source of lightning with a four-dimensional lightning strike hitting a three-dimensional surface, what would you get? Now I would suggest to you that you end up with a three-dimensional ball of light, which, like lightning sometimes just sort of move across the surface, or seem to, this could move across the surface as well. And of course, just as we can move our light source through the bodies of these people, through that circle there, through the moon, into the water and into the ground, ball lightning can do the same, which is why sometimes you see ball lightning inside houses during thunderstorms. And why is it so rarely detected? Well, I would suggest that by this model, it's so rarely detected because there's only a small chance that it's going to strike exactly at eye level. Okay, so it probably strikes, high above eye level normally, or even slightly underground, which is why most of the time we don't see it. So that's another way that this model works. Okay, now I've got a lot more information about how this works according to my model. I will be sharing that in subsequent videos, so stay tuned. And if you like what I've said, tell me that by liking it, because I can't see your face, so I don't know how you're taking this. And also, I'd be delighted if you hit the subscribe button, because you can keep abreast of my ideas as I put them out. Okay, for now, goodbye.